What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football week 6 top 25. As always, I have Ty with me, our college football and basketball guy. This week, we're diving in with a lot of teams dropping out and entering the top 25 for the first time this year. But before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Get us to 200, where we'll be doing that giveaway. But before we get into the rankings, we're going to look at who dropped from last week's rankings. And Ty, which one of these teams is kind of the most intriguing here? It could be either getting into the rankings next week or, kind of going to stay out of the rankings for a while.
Man, it's hard to be high on any of these teams. I mean, I guess I'll go Florida State since it's only them and Minnesota out of these teams with one loss. But I think Florida State has the best chance to rebound because they have Clemson at home. So there's still a chance for them going forward. I don't really see any of the rest of the teams. I would say the rest of the teams are out of the playoff officially. So it's up to Florida State, I guess.
And then in the others receiving votes, you still have Florida State there and Baylor. But, we're throwing James Madison into it because they're 5-0 right now. Cincinnati has rebounded. They're 4-1. Same with Maryland, a surprise team in the Big Ten this year. That could be giving some teams fits late. But out of all these teams, Ty, which one do you think could make the jump next week besides Florida State?
I'm going Maryland. I'm really high on Maryland this year. Mainly, there's a little bias in there because they challenged our Wolverines, but they look good again this week. I never believed in Mike Locksley, but he's proven me wrong. It seems like they're really putting it together now, so they could make a big leap this year. And we got Washington State entering the rankings this week. No one really knew they were even playing. They beat Cal. It's kind of a ho-hum game. This is really just because a bunch of teams are falling out of the rankings, but they're 4-1 with a really close loss to a good Oregon team. So this team has a chance to prove itself this week, going to USC, who we've seen struggle a little bit the last few weeks. So who knows what could happen there.
24, we got the LSU Tigers making a jump back into the top 25. In the collective ranking, we did not have them ranked, but I had them ranked early in the year. But they get to prove this week that this is a completely different team from that week 1 loss to Florida State. And I think they will contend against Tennessee at home. It'll be closer than I think people are anticipating, just because Tennessee hasn't really played, a really good team. Obviously, they played Pitt as their toughest game in Pitt, but Pitt's obviously falling now. And LSU's looking for their first big win under Brian Kelly, and it'll be interesting to see if they can get it this week. But the biggest concern is quarterback JT Daniels. Last week, and I know that it's a tough place to play, but 8 for 20 on 80 yards isn't going to get it done against these top 10 SEC teams.
All right, Mississippi State comes into the rankings now at 23. Just dominated Texas A&M, forcing 4 turnovers. Will Rogers really starting to look like a potential Heisman dark horse. 303 touchdowns on what was supposed to be a good Texas A&M defense. So you got to give Mississippi State some props. One ugly game against LSU this year, but 4-1 start in a tough SEC. I think they have a chance to get things rolling. Now they have a good Arkansas team coming in to their place, so they could really build some momentum going forward here in the SEC West.
22, we get the Washington Huskies falling a few spots here. And, they had a tough game Friday night. They almost came back and won after being down a ton of points heading into the fourth quarter. They almost pulled it off, held UCLA scoreless, but just couldn't get that last touchdown. Michael Penix struggled a little bit because of the 2 INTs, but other than that, he was himself balling out, putting up lots of points for this Washington defense or offense. And I think they're going to rebound well against a very bad Arizona State team.
All right, Kansas State, another team jumping into our rankings here. They beat a good Texas Tech team. And, this team just really has a lot of momentum. I think they would for sure be top 15 if not for that ugly Tulane loss. But Tulane's looking like a solid team, too. That's no pushover. But if they can get through Iowa State here on the road, then you're really going to be making a case for them as potential Big 12 championship material because that conference is so up in the air right now. But Adrian Martinez finally looking like he's found himself after all his struggles at Nebraska. And he's really just putting this offense on his back with 2 big showings in a row. So I'd say watch out for Kansas State going forward.
And at 20, we got another Kansas team. We got the Jayhawks making the first appearance this year. And to give them credit, this team was projected under 2.5 wins. And here they are, 5-0. Nobody thought, I think, they'd have game day this year. and they're playing TCU, who is another shocking team to be ranked this week as well. So a game, you were talking about the Big 12 that's really up in the air. This week, I think we're gonna get some more clarity in the Big 12 standings a little bit. But if Kansas wins this game, I think you might be looking at a top 15 team next week at this time.
All right, Syracuse jumps to 19. Absolute dominant win over lowly Wagner. Played 10-minute quarters in the second half and still wins 59 to nothing. So not much to be said there. Just a very inferior team. And now they get a bye. So it's almost like a 2-week bye here, but they're still 5-0. They still have Clemson left on their schedule. So they'll have a chance to prove themselves. I don't know if I have them winning 10, 11 games this year, but right now they're 5-0 with a solid win over Purdue. So for now, you got to keep them in the top 20.
18, we have the UCLA Bruins making a big jump in, as I talked about them beating Washington. Zach Charbonnet could be, the first running back taken off of the board in the next year's NFL draft. He's just been that good this year, pretty much carrying that offense along with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Their rushing attack is very deadly, and then good play action and RPO for UCLA is kind of how they're rolling with it this year. But if they can beat Utah, I think this team could almost enter the top 10 just because who knows with all the craziness that's probably going to shake up the rankings next week as well. But UCLA, if they go to 6-0 with a home win at Utah and versus Washington, this is going to be a tough team to not put into the top 10.
All right, we got TCU at 17, and nothing else to say other than it was just a bloodbath against Oklahoma, scoring early and often, putting up 41 in the first half, 55 in the game, almost 700 yards on offense. And it's another team with a dark horse Heisman candidate, Max Duggan, throwing for 300, had another big game on the ground as well. TCU is looking like a real force. It's looking like a TCU team of old when we had those prime Gary Patterson teams. So they have a huge game this week, one of the bigger games of the Big 12 all season, and it's TCU and Kansas. I don't think anyone saw that coming, but here we are, and it's a big chance for the Horned Frogs.
16, we got the Cougars moving up a lot, and nothing, they really did spectacular last week. The rushing attack is kind of how this team really goes about their business. First half struggled. Obviously, you can see they're minus 21 rushing yards at half, but they picked it up in the second half, got back on track. And I think it's going to be a tough test for them this week against Notre Dame. This is a neutral site game in Vegas. And I think this is where you're going to see the BYU, what they're really made of. I'm not saying they're going to win or lose this game, but I think it will be closer than people expect. Notre Dame is favored by, I think, 2 or 3 points right now. And I think it's going to be within a field goal. No matter, could be either way who wins this game.
All right, NC State falls just from 12 to 15. Can't fault them too much losing to Clemson on the road, a top 5 team. They just couldn't run the ball. That's the bottom line. That Clemson defense just shut them down completely. And Devin Leary played okay, but when you got to throw the ball 48 times against that defense, you're never going to light them up or anything. So tough loss for NC State. But this week, they have a really good opportunity with Florida State coming in, a really solid team, an opportunity to get back on their right footing. I still think they have a chance to win the ACC as they are in the opposite division from Clemson. So going forward, they still have a chance. They just got to win out, basically.
14, we got another ACC team in the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest. And the big story here is obviously winning on the road at Florida State, who was undefeated at the time. But I think it's the bounce back after that heartbreaking loss at home to Clemson. How'd they respond with some long touchdown drives and field goal drive as well? They really put this game away. It's kind of demoralizing when your opponent scores on 80, 90, 75-yard drives, 71-yard drives, and you get points. And as a defense, that's just super demoralizing. And it's tough to, go back out there and be like, well, they're going to score on us eventually. But Sam Hartman obviously had a good day passing the ball, but they should have an easy win this week against Army at home, looking to get to 5-1 and still possibly contend for that ACC title.
All right, the Oregon Ducks quietly moving into the top 15. I know they were absolutely bludgeoned by Georgia week 1, but ever since then, this has looked like a really good team. And I think a little bit of that can be chalked up to first game with a new quarterback, new head coach, because it seems like they're really finding their footing now. This week they go to Arizona, probably the second worst team in the Pac-12, so that should be an easy win for them. And this team just keeps rolling. Bo Nix really starting to find himself. I think the change of scenery really helped him. and he's starting to run the ball with a lot of success, which we didn't see too much at Auburn. So I think that's a big plus to his game, and I think Oregon's going to keep rolling.
12, we have the Kentucky Wildcats falling, and I think this team, should be at 7. In my opinion, if game changes just one possession, this Wildcats team is looking at a 5-0 record with a solid win on the road. But 2 strip sacks late in the fourth quarter led to the loss, and it's nothing you really can't prevent. I mean, Will Levis had a not his best game, but he had a solid game to put them in position to win this game. But it's Kentucky. I think they should rebound here against South Carolina. That game could be a one possession game because of I think it'll be a high scoring game. No defense, I think, will be in that game. But this Kentucky team, don't write them off yet in the SEC. They still got some big games coming up and could pull off a win or two against a team that you might not expect.
All right, Penn State staying put here at number 11. Not a good looking score, 17-7 over a lowly Northwestern team, but it was pouring rain the whole game, so you can cut them a little bit of slack on this one, give them a pass. They still ran the ball fairly well, and the defense just really stood its ground. Sean Clifford, ugly stat line, but like I said, the weather was really bad, so not really suitable for throwing the ball. So the Nittany Lions, get a fairly easy win. They get to 5-0, and now they have a bye. But following that bye, they come to the big house to take on the Wolverines in what should be a top 10 matchup. So that could be a season defining win for them if they can get it. And I think this team really needs a win like that to prove it's back after 2 not so great seasons in a row. But right now, they look like every bit of a top 10 team.
And starting off our top 10, we have Utah staying put with a solid victory over Oregon State, a team that, was capable of possibly pulling off an upset against USC. And Utah took it to them early and often. They have recorded a takeaway in 7 straight games. The offense, struggled a little bit here, but they found ways to score, making the most of each drive. And Cameron Rising, I think after, the week 1 performance of losing in Florida in the swamp, he's responded in these last 4 weeks. A pretty solid ball. Completion percentage is up, QBR is up, and now they finally got their true test in the Pac-12, going on the road to UCLA. Probably only going to be like 5,000 fans there, so you won't feel much of a environment shock, but it'll be a good game to say the least.
All right, we got Tennessee staying put at 9, coming off a bye last week, but this week they go to LSU, so we're really going to find out a lot about them. I think this is by far their toughest game of the season. I know they had Pittsburgh and Florida already, but I think LSU is better than both of those teams from what we've seen. So, and you got to go to Death Valley. So it's a huge test for Tennessee, and we're really going to find out if they've officially turned the corner to being a possible elite program again.
8, we have Ole Miss jumping into the top 10 because of that big win against Kentucky. I'm still concerned about this team. I know I was talking to you about it, that the offense is going to slow this team down at one point this year. It shouldn't be this week against a very bad Vanderbilt team, but when they, get into the deeper SEC play and play some better teams, I think Jackson Dart is going to struggle, and I think this team will get blown out at least once this year. Ole Miss fans probably don't want to hear that, but they got to look at reality here. And this team, they're escaping this close win. I mean, I'm giving them credit for this close win, but if they don't get 2 key plays late, I think they lose by at least 2 possessions in this game. But moving forward, we got them here in the top 10, and you got to give them credit where credit's due.
All right, Oklahoma State gets a huge win, and they move up to 7 in our rankings. Big revenge game for them, coming off losing by 1 yard in that Big 12 championship last year. But the defense really just stood its ground in the fourth quarter, shutting out Baylor and Spencer Sanders. Another solid game, nothing too crazy, but just enough to win. And that's really what he's done his whole career. It's just been a winner. So Oklahoma State, clear favorite in the Big 12 now going forward. I think it's them and everyone else after that Oklahoma loss. I think they control their own destiny and then some to win the conference. So they just have to take care of business.
At 6, we got USC, and they took care of business against Arizona State. Nothing really, exciting happens other than Caleb Williams's, throw where he's flat-footed and just threw a dot. But other than that, I mean, he had a great game. They committed their first turnover of the year, which is hard to believe now that they're 5-0. And they never trailed in this game, but if you kind of watch this game, it kind of seemed like they just couldn't get over the hump of making this really feel like a blowout. Obviously, the score kind of says it's a blowout, but if you watch this game, it was more of just a kind of back and forth where you score 7, they score 3. But USC is looking to, improve on a really good start to the year. Lincoln Riley still doesn't have a loss as a Trojan. And I think, it could continue this week, moving to 6-0, possibly moving into the top 5, depending on some key games this week. But this Trojan team, has all the respect from both of us.
All right, our Michigan Wolverines staying put at number 5. It wasn't a sexy win, but it was never going to be at Iowa against one of the worst offenses in the country and one of the best defenses in the country. You knew it was going to be that kind of game. JJ McCarthy only 155 yards, but the game plan was perfect, I thought. Don't turn the ball over, just dink and dunk your way to a win on the road because Iowa, they're going to give you those 7-8 yard plays and they just want to feast on turnovers. So Michigan didn't let them do that. Defense looks improved outside of the linebackers, but I still think they need another impressive showing if we're going to put them in the top 4. I think they're a slight step behind those 4 teams right now, but they'll have their chances going forward.
And at 4, we got the Clemson Tigers with another big win over a ranked team. They won 11 in a row, which is the longest streak in the FBS currently, and they won 37 in a row at home. So if you're going to beat Clemson, looks like they're going to have to go to your place to really make this happen. DJ Ugalele, obviously, had another great game. He's really playing like the quarterback we thought he would be last year. And there's really no slowing this team down. I think their game to lose this year would have been at Wake Forest, but they escaped with the victory. And I can kind of see this team cruising to another ACC championship title game.
All right, number 3 is the Ohio State Buckeyes. And now you get into a part of these rankings where all 3 of these teams are interchangeable, in my opinion. I think Ohio State has an argument to be number 1. This week, another just dominant win. Rutgers got down 7-0 and then just never looked back after that. CJ Stroud, not the big performance that we're used to seeing, only throwing for 150 and throwing a pick, but Mayan Williams took over with almost 190 and 5 touchdowns. So that's what makes this team so dangerous. If Stroud is struggling, they can always run the ball really well and vice versa. Something's always going to be there. And this week, I think CJ Stroud's going to be licking his chops going into Michigan State against one of the worst secondaries in all of college football. So look for another 400-yard game out of him and another big win for Ohio State.
And at 2, we are moving the Bulldogs down with the very, shocking win, I think you can say. I did not expect this Bulldogs team to get the win against Missouri, but the defense, they did their part in the fourth quarter, holding them to, essentially nothing on the ground or through the air in the fourth quarter. And Stetson Bennett really got the team going in the fourth quarter. That's kind of when this game turned around. But, Georgia, obviously great teams win games like this where good teams lose. And Georgia, they're still a top 2 team here, looking SEC favorites, possibly against Alabama, who's obviously at number 1 now. But if this team wants to really solidify themselves, they can't be, escaping these close victories. Even 2 weeks, if you want to say the Kent State game was a close game for, a lot of people's standards. But they're going on the road to Florida. Anthony Richardson could light him up, or he could, maybe get 80 yards and Georgia blows him out. We just don't know what to expect now from this Georgia team after 2 sluggish performances.
All right, back at number 1 is the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I think it's a little alarming for every other team that it looked like Alabama didn't play their best game here, and they beat a ranked team on the road by 23 points. Even when they're not at their best, they're still putting up huge numbers on offense. Bryce Young possibly out for this Texas A&M game with his shoulder injury. But you saw backup quarterback, I'm forgetting his name, but you saw that they didn't miss a beat when he went in the game. So I think they'll be just fine either way, and they'll get Bryce Young back the week after at the very latest. So nothing to worry about for Alabama, and another big win on the road. So they take over the top spot.
And that's going to be it for the video today. Make sure you come back later this week to see our picks for this week's biggest games. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.